open border crisis. And by every metric, Kamala Harris has failed to secure our borders. Instead, advancing far-left Democrats' failed open border policies and the needs of illegal immigrants over the safety of Americans.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the...
Yes, the border was a tough task, but we wonder, did you pay attention to it at all, from the violence to the diseases more young Americans are dying? And it's not COVID. Migrants could be bringing infectious diseases across our southern border. When they are bused to New York and elsewhere, these diseases go with them. A recent study showed that more than 4% of migrants from Central and South America to Europe were sick with Chagas disease. It's contagious without the help of an animal or a blood-sucking bug and can cause serious complications, including heart failure. Naya Jaji Sood, a spokesperson at the Division of Global Migration and Quarantine at the CDC, told me that though the CDC has comprehensive systems to track communicable diseases, they do not track diseases by immigration status. Sood added that underreporting might...
It's not her full responsibility and job, but she's leading the effort.
Border czar of the Biden administration. Our sources are the White House, University of Houston, and Rice University.
There is no question that Kamala Harris was named border czar. However, I think there is some doubt regarding what actual influence she's had on Biden administration border policy over the course of the past 3 years.
Rice University professor Mark Jones adding it is Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas who's actually running the day-to-day operations at the border based on the Biden administration's policies. So is Kamala Harris the border czar of the Biden administration? Well, our sources say that answer needs context. As U of H professor Brandon Rottinghouse shared via email, quote, there are technically czars in the White House, personnel who have a single administrative policy task. What Harris did as VP is more of a diplomatic assignment as the VP rather than a full-fledged policy role. But she was clearly intended to be the point person for the immigration issue.
Due to the success of the national polio vaccination program, the last naturally occurring cases of polio in the United States occurred in 1979. More recent polio infections are the result of travel or contact with someone who had an oral polio vaccine in another country. The United States uses injectable polio vaccines, which are made from dead polio virus that cannot spread the disease. Many poorer countries use an oral vaccine that contains live polio virus, which can shed into the infected person's feces. The virus then can spread in sewage and on unclean hands. Bassan says that the polio virus is being found in New York sewage that matches the strains of polio caused by oral vaccines. The ideal ADHD-friendly daily routine, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC), chickenpox is rare in the United States. But Bassan says there have been outbreaks of chickenpox in the shelters housing recently arriving migrants. The CDC says chickenpox is highly contagious. If one person has it, up to 90% of the people close to that person will also become infected unless they are immune. And it can be very serious, even life-threatening. Bassan also says that these migrants are bringing polio, which can permanently paralyze a person. Paralysis is fatal in between 2 and 10% of the cases because it damages the muscles that are needed to breathe. 149. 10. The administration is encouraging undocumented migrants to come to the United States by creating what it calls legal pathways. It claims that it is using harsher measures to discourage migrants from crossing illegally between ports of entry instead of using the legal pathways, but it is deporting fewer illegal border crossers than it did before it adopted the new measures. One of the legal pathways is a humanitarian parole initiative that offers parole to up to 30,000 migrants a month from Venezuelan, Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua who do not have visas. Another is the CBP-1 mobile application program, which migrants without visas use to schedule an appointment to present themselves for inspection at a designated port of entry. The administration has used this program to admit more than 133,000 asylum seekers.
What is your experience in international diplomacy? You got made
the representative of the country to handle the foreign affairs. You failed so badly they yanked you out when you were actually the boss in charge. The border czar, you just complete abject failure to that. Your only appearance down there was to sit in a chair in the desert while they interviewed you, trying to be cute, flashing your pearls, you know, and you didn't do your job. So you're talking now about you want to legitimize 20 million aliens who've come in here and see that they get fast-tracked so they can vote and become part of the whole process. What are you doing? Whose jobs are you taking away? What about the people that actually lined up to go through?
Now, as Kamala backtracks and changes her stance on immigration, we must remember she was the point person, not the day-to-day operation. However, she was supposed to oversee the day-to-day operation and make sure the immigration laws are being enforced. Now, do y'all remember back in 2020 to today, Representative Ronnie Jackson TX13 introduced the Border Czar Accountability Act of 2022, which will force Border Czar Kamala Harris to do her job and visit our southern border rather than dismiss and ignore the worst border crisis in American history. The Border Czar Accountability Act will require any cabinet member appointed by the president to lead efforts related to immigration or securing the U.S.-Mexico border to visit the border every 60 days. It also requires the cabinet members to submit a report to the president and Congress no later than 15 days after each visit, explaining their findings and outlining solutions for improving the security and situation at the southern border. If the report is not submitted, Jackson told Henry Rogers of the Daily Caller, Biden's push for open border policies and amnesty for all illegal immigrants has created and continues to bolster the worst border crisis in history. The current situation at our southern border is a public health crisis, a haven for criminal activity, and a threat to our national security. Despite alarming data coming in from the border, President Biden's senior cabinet member and so-called border czar Kamala Harris has wholly dismissed and ignored her responsibility to address and solve this crisis. President Biden appointed Vice President Kamala Harris as border czar 318 days ago, and she only visited the southern border once for a short photo op, far away from where the crisis is taking place, and only after receiving pressure. Rep. Scott Destrelle. Vice President Kamala Harris was appointed to serve as border czar 317 days ago and has yet to step foot inside a detention facility. Harris has laughed off her lack of response and put the safety of Americans at risk. It's time she's held accountable. Now you can act like it wasn't your responsibility, but she was well aware of the situation, and like Judge Joe Brown said, too lazy to do something about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, I rise to condemn Vice President Kamala Harris for her failed and dangerous policies as Joe Biden's border czar that caused the most catastrophic border crisis in modern history. No matter what congressional district you go to, the number one issue facing Americans is Kamala Harris's open border crisis. And by every metric, Kamala Harris has failed to secure our borders, instead advancing far-left Democrats' failed open border policies and the needs of illegal immigrants over the safety of Americans. This resolution condemns Kamala Harris's role as Joe Biden's open border czar and affirms that the American people deserve elected officials who understand the gravity of the crisis at the border and who will work to secure the border. Now, Democrats will try to run from this record, but they cannot hide. Joe Biden's open border czar, Kamala Harris, and every elected Democrat is responsible for this border crisis, along with every other aspect of Joe Biden's failed and feckless record, which brought not only the border crisis, but skyrocketing Bidenflation, surging violent crimes, chaos, and weakness around the world. We all remember the widely publicized delegation that Vice President Kamala Harris conducted and led, saying, "Do not come, do not come." And millions of illegals poured into our country since then because of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's administration's unconstitutional, illegal executive actions, wiping away President Trump's effective border security policies, which created the most secure border in modern history. The American people know that. In fact, just last month, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced over 130,000 illegal immigrant encounters at our southern border in June. This is roughly 4,300 illegal encounters at our southern border a day, which is 4 times more than the definition of a crisis set by Obama's DHS Secretary Jay Johnson. So far this fiscal year, there have been 93 individuals whose names appear on the terrorist watch list who were stopped trying to enter the U.S. illegally between ports of entry at the southern border. That's over 500 since Kamala Harris was assigned the border czar role. And on our northern border, in the Swanton sector, which I represent, I have seen firsthand with the Border Patrol the disastrous consequences of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's administration's failed far-left open border agenda, which caused a historic surge in illegal crossings, the likes of which we have never seen on our northern border before, including individuals on the terrorist watch list. And this is not just a national security crisis, it is a humanitarian crisis. Under Kamala Harris's role as Joe Biden's border czar, nearly 80,000 minors have been lost, left, slipped through the cracks. This is also part of the violent crime crisis surge concerning every single American. Look in upstate New York. A 21-year-old innocent girl was killed by an illegal and buried in a Syracuse public park. A 15-year-old innocent girl was raped by an illegal in Albany County, all because of Kamala Harris's failed policies as open borders.
Medicaid spending on emergency medical services for illegal aliens more than doubled from 2020 to 2021 from around $3 billion to more than $7 billion. So can we really trust that she is going to do any better than she has been doing for the last 4 years? Or is she telling us what we want to hear?